Authentic communication is a must in any places in our society, regardless if it is part of your family, part of your classroom, between friends, as part of the workplace. Keep in mind that the more authentic you are in your communication, the more your team and the more people around you will get to know you better, but also get to appreciate what you can bring into their lives. So that is the topic today. Hopefully you're doing great. My name is Alain Faber. I've been teaching for more than 25 years, and I am working on a podcast as I bring my thoughts from teaching, from what I learn every day from my students, but also in life and so on. You'll see this podcast is divided in three parts. The first part is about the learner's perspective. Second is about the teacher's perspective. And the third one is about leadership, which is a topic I enjoy greatly. But some of you would say, well, what does it mean, an authentic communication? Well, you have to keep in mind that often when we talk to people, we do know and we can have a feel about what comes our way. We can know if people respect us. We know if truth is being said. We know that the person is there for us. Now, if some of us sometimes, like me, have difficulties to gauge some people, then consistency becomes my ally. Someone usually will bring up their authentic self as we go along. So sometimes their authentic self is even more amazing as the relationship progresses. And sometimes, and you notice that if someone is uh, inauthentic, then things come up as we go along. Some people call it red flags as we go along. It's all part of the fun. So today's topic about the authentic communication will have our first segment about the learner's perspective. As part of my life, I learn English. I learn new things every day. And as part of a learner, me, myself, but also for my students and people around us, it is very important that authentic communication is present. And here's why. If a student is in a classroom, for example, or you're part of a team, listening is the first thing that you need to do. And it's important to listen well, because as you listen for understanding. And often, if you're new to a job, you're new to a class, you're in a situation where you don't know people or you don't know the context, listening will be one of the first thing you need to do. However, you don't want to be a listener forever, because if you're a listener forever, then you're missing the opportunity to share with others what you've learned, but also helping others, helping other learners around you to get better. So here I mentioned that the reason why you want to be you want to have authentic communication around you is that as a listener, you want to better understand the lessons, the knowledge being provided, the wisdom being provided, but also this is a great opportunity to grow. And keeping in mind that the main reason why we want to grow every day is that the next day, you are a much better person than the previous day. And if you learn, even if it's one little thing at any given day, then after a week, after a month, after a year, then that's how we can see how people can progress. Now, for the learner's perspective, it's also important to keep in mind that authentic communication also involves speaking. So if you're learning like for example, in my science class, if you are learning new concepts, the idea of being able to speak authentically in the classroom, in a group setting, in your team allows for one thing. First of all, it allows you to ask questions. And I do believe that questions are amazing. Someone who feels that they cannot ask questions because of their environment says something about the environment. If someone is comfortable to ask questions, then usually what happens is that the person says, okay, I'm actively progressing and learning. And that question will allow me to be a better learner after I get an answer. And that's something to keep in mind. Now, I know there's always some questions that come up because people are not listening. But people that are involved and they have good questions, it's always nice to answer them. Because keep in mind that once you can speak for understanding, there's a few things. You are improving, no, you are building confidence with the voice you have. your voice in sharing with others what you know, but also showing some vulnerability to share with others that there's things that you don't quite know yet. And what I've learned over the years is that when you have students that are asking questions, many other people have similar questions. How do I know that? Well, I've been teaching for more than 25 years, and every so often in a meeting, when I ask a question, then I realize that other people have similar questions, or asking a clarification question, allow for others to realize that they have questions too. So when you are in a group of learners, the best thing is about listening, but second, be able to speak. And the other reason for that is that once you speak and listen at the same time, then as a learner, you can start collaborating. You can start collaborating between students learning, and that's when you can exponentially increase and improve what you're learning, because you're not only addressing what you're learning from your point of view, but you are including other people's perspective, other people's experiences, and I think that's amazing if you can get that done. Very nice. I know some people sometimes they say, "Well, I hate presentations in a classroom. I don't feel comfortable." I can understand that. However, giving a chance to share with others what you've learned will give you a chance to build confidence. Other people will know what you know that they don't, and respects can increase because everybody have difficulties to speak in front of a group, including I. In front of a class in a high school, it's easier than in front of adults. I'm learning. I joined Toastmasters for many years to get better at that. I've been doing workshops at my job so I can improve my speaking capacities in front of a group. And it is still a learning process, which is amazing. Very nice. The other way to communicate authentically as a learner is with writing. When you write as a learner, it gives you a chance to not just write an answer, not just write an essay, write a report. Writing gives you a chance to think, to learn to think, not only to communicate your ideas the way you think they are, but to find a way to communicate your idea authentically so that others can understand. And that's the key thing here. And I remember I was listening to a video with Jordan Peterson, and that's what he was saying. So he was saying in his class how we tell students to write essays, write reports, write paragraphs, and we don't tell them why. Well, the reason why we are writing is that once you're writing, you actually have to put your thoughts together in a logical way so that others can understand. And I think that is quite amazing. I remember years ago in Canada, one of the prime minister was, let's see, oh, I just forget his name. Oh, look at this. I'm forgetting his name. I'm going to have to look into that. So it's funny when you are missing a piece of information. It was Stephen Harper. There you go. I have a lot of respect for him because I remember when he started into politics and he wanted to be a prime minister. The first time he ran, I remember him in a French debate. And I remember him sometimes listening to a question and then answering something that was way different. But then the second time around, he had improved his French tremendously. And then when he was getting a question from reporters or the audience, he could actually answer those questions. And that was amazing. But then in one interview, he was mentioning how when he has a press conference, for example, or speech to do, the one thing he does is that he wrote back then his speeches in French first, and then he wrote his English speech. And he was saying in an interview that the reason why he wrote his French speech first is that French being his second language, maybe more languages, but at least his second language, he had to think a lot more to make ideas simpler for him to be able to communicate them, but to make sure that the audience would understand. So here, as a learner, these are the three things you have to keep in mind. First, you need to listen for understanding. Second, You need to be able to speak to others, speak your ideas so that you can improve and bring forward connections and collaboration. And the next one is writing, because authentic writing is amazing because it allows you to learn to better think so that people better understand your ideas. Because nobody can understand what's happening in your mind, but you need to put it on paper or on a device so that others can understand. That is the key. My second segment tonight is about teaching. And as a teacher, authentic communication is so important. So here are a few examples similar to what I've done later, but on the perspective of a teacher. So when I talk about a teacher, it could be a teacher in a classroom, but it could also be a parent in a family. It could also be uh, the team manager in a company, for example. So first of all, the first thing you have to keep in mind, you need to be able to listen. No, actually, I'm going to start with speaking, I think, for this one. Often when we think of teachers, we see them sharing lessons, guiding students for in collaboration in discussions. And the reason for that is that a teacher with their years of experience can improve their speaking skills for understanding. So the idea here is that you're bringing authentic speaking so that students understand the process you're trying to share, and at the same time, they see the clarity in what you're sharing. And that's important because I remember in university, I was in a class, and if my energy was not all there, I was listening to a teacher, and after a few minutes, I had no idea what they were talking about. And that's very hard because I remember actually when I was at McGill, one of my physics class, I remember being there trying to focus and pay attention, have difficulties, and then my brain would just zone out. And all I could hear was blah, 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 like a background noise. And I was doing my own thing, and I had no idea what was going on in class. So as a teacher, it's very important authentically to find ways to be the best communicator you can be, so people can understand your lessons, the wisdom behind your lessons, but also the instructions for them so they can work on their learning. The next thing you have to do as a teacher is to listen. A teacher that only talks doesn't have an opportunity to learn from their students, that don't have a chance to understand what the needs of the students are at that moment. And that's something to be mindful of. Because if you are just speaking and not listening, then what happens is that your students will zone out, as I used to do in my classes. But on top of listening to students in what they share will tell you if they understood lessons, will help you as a teacher, as a parent, as a team leader to understand what is the team or what the person understanding about the situation. And it's important because if you want to do something specific and you have a vision of a direction where you want to lead something, then you don't want people to do things erratically and not focusing on what they need to do and where they need to go. So here the listening part is important so that you can be part of the collaboration between the different people involved in you as a teacher. But if students have difficulties, by listening, it gives you a chance to bring some individualized teaching, individualized lessons for students. Because sometimes when we think of individualized lessons for specific students, it's not that you have to have 100% different lessons for students. Often is you bring a situation to everybody, and then you get to a point where some students will stop at that point and do their own things. And after that, you are working with others and move them along. Because keeping in mind that when you have a classroom and there's different levels in your classroom, you cannot consider everybody the same way. But by listening as a teacher, listening as a parent, then you give the opportunity for the learners to ask questions so that you can better help them. And I think that is a must. The third part for teachers is writing. And writing is important because it gives you a chance to share with others the logical steps of what you would like. Now, writing is great, but there's some drawbacks on that. So let's see if I can share why. I remember when I started teaching and I would give a project to do, I would outline the expectations and I would just leave it open enough for students to bring their own ideas in the projects. But since COVID, something I've realized is that they want to know what the project is all about, but they also want to have a checklist of everything that they need to do for the project. Now, this is a good idea, but that sometimes I don't like it. That may be controversial. The reason why I think that checklists are great is that students just have to follow all the things they need to do. And they say, great, this is what I had to do. This is what I did. Therefore, I expect a great mark. And often people that are doing that are doing great. The big difficulties I find here is that since COVID, and as I mentioned, this is my opinion, is that students do like to have a checklist, but I find that there's so much less creativity in what they produce. And they're a great piece of information. They're great projects. They're great information being shared. But I find that there's less creativity because they're leaning on checklist to do what they need to do instead of looking at what they're supposed to do and then bring their colors, bring their interests in the projects. And this is what I think, what I miss the most with respect to some of the projects over the years. They're still very good. I'm enjoying them. But there's a few things missing sometimes. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and that may be controversial as well, is that if a person that needs a checklist to know exactly what to do, and that's what you do, for me, it's someone that needs sometimes just reassurance and someone who will do exactly what you want. And that's great. We need people like this. We need great technicians, people at the college level, the apprenticeship. They need to do a job. They need to follow rules. They need to follow regulations. That's amazing. However, if you want to go to, for example, university or higher level, you need to be able to learn to think and be able to take your thoughts and look at the new information coming towards you, and then learn to think differently sometimes so that new ideas can come through. And this is what university, I think, is for me, where people are growing and not necessarily doing the mainstream ideas because they have their own ideas. They can collaborate to create something new in society. So that's my perspective on this one. Hopefully you can appreciate that. If you're not quite sure, put a comment below. I'm always reading your comments and answering them. It's always fun to do so. And that brings me to my third segment for this podcast today. And the third segment is about leadership. So when I talk about leadership, it could be leadership within your school, as a teacher, as a school leader, could also be a leader within, like a student leader, for example, could be a leader in your community, religious community, your extracurricular activities, even leaders in your family. That's important. And here are the different parts I have here. Leaders need to be able to speak very well because they need to be able to bring the vision forward so that people that are working with them better understand what's happening. So you see that sometimes when you have a bunch of little kids, there will be a leader coming through, have ideas, they will lead games, and that's amazing. If you are part of a team at work, you have a team leader, but often you have one person in the group that has an idea and they're leading others to develop the new ideas that you have there. So leaders allows others to grow with them through collaboration. But you need, as a leader, to speak for understanding so that you can better guide them towards where they need to go. That is, I think, a good point. The next part will be, I think, listening. A good leader needs to be able to listen to have a better feel about the organization, to have a better feel about their classroom, their community. If they don't listen, what happens is people may not recognize that person as much as a leader, because leadership is a privilege in some ways. We are giving leadership responsibilities to a person because they are in line with our beliefs, but we know that they are listening to us as individual to go along their vision. Now, leaders are amazing because leaders are creating a culture to make sure that people feel comfortable. If a leader cannot speak and listen for their culture, for their vision, then it's much harder for people to continue following you or being there to assist you, to collaborate with you. These are things to think about. And the next one is about writing. Leaders need to write, and often I do think that leaders need to write for encouragement. Too often, people will write a note, an email, and it's not always as positive as it can be. So here we have to be careful. I do believe that as a leader, we are to write as much as possible the positive things, what works, and the next step. And if it happens that you need to address a situation that is delicate, address a situation where things need to change, I do think that a person needs to be able to speak and listen to the individual to whom they need to work with. So if you think of, for example, annual reports that companies write every year. Annual reports, it shows what the company has done during the year, has share with the group how well they did. Sometimes they didn't go too well, but they share what is the next step. An annual report try to show the best version of a company. And yes, there's a whole bunch of memos, a whole bunch of different discussions that happen to increase and improve what a company can do. Leaders do that all the time. But to have leaders that are negative, then it's tricky because you need to have your collaborators, people that are with you, other leaders in your company work as well. The same thing if you're in a classroom, for example, as a teacher. Teacher is a leader, but in the classroom, there are many other leaders. There are leaders that will be either with the mood of the classroom. There's always the joker that leads in some ways. There's also there's always a group of 5 or 6 people that will ask questions and they're leaders that way. I've heard students asking other students to ask their questions because they didn't feel too good. So asking questions is part of leading a group. If you're doing group work, there's often a chemistry and an organization within the group, and the leader comes forward. It's always interesting, keeping in mind that if you have a chance to give the opportunity for people to be leaders and improve their leadership skills, they will increase their teaching abilities and at the same time learn. So in this podcast, we always talk about how the three are always interrelated: the learning aspect of life, teaching aspect of life, and leadership as well. I hope you've enjoyed this podcast tonight. And this, I was looking into this because there's one thing I wanted to ask. One last piece of information. As a teacher, I'll share an example of how I can improve communication. So I do write emails to the parents of my students several times in the semester. And the reason for that is that I do believe that if you are writing, you can find a way to build communities. So let me give you an example. So our semesters are about 20 weeks or so. So when I start a semester, I always like to send an email within the first couple of days of a semester, sometimes even a day or two before the beginning of a semester, so I can welcome students and parents to my classroom and telling them, teaching them that communication has started already. So students and parents feel welcome. Now, I always include parents and students. I'm doing blind copies, so nobody has each other's perspective, each other's, each other's addresses. But what happens is that by sending an email to everybody, they know that I'm there. And if they have questions, they can ask me right away. Then I send another email, usually week 2 or 3. At that time, this email is about the fact that I'm sharing with them what we've done so far in the first couple of weeks. If I have a fun activity we did, a few things we've learned, and mentioning to them that if they have questions, I'm here for them. So usually within the first 3 weeks of school, I've done 2 email communication with my parents. And that's important because it is slowly building a community of learners within the classes we have. Students know that I'm sending positive emails. Students get to know that I include them in the emails to parents for transparencies. Students love that. And then for that time, for week 3, I already have 2 emails where parents have received positive input from their students at that time. So at our school, for example, at week 5, we have what we call a progress report. So at week 5, there's a few things that I do. So everybody that is in the 70s and above, I send a positive email. So that's week 3. No, it's the third email within the first 5 weeks. Parents are happy. They get to know that students are going well. If I have students that are under 70, then I have personalized emails to them for a few reasons. First, I share with parents what is happening and what suggestion to help their students. If I see there's some evaluations or some learning skills that are not quite well, then I can propose some solutions. Because the 5th week report, we are just sharing with parents how things are going, and students are always included. So even if sometimes the email is not saying that the students are doing amazing, the parents know that I've talked to them already a couple times, or I've written to them a couple times, and therefore if they have questions, they can ask me, and the communication is open. That works wonderfully. Now, midterm happens usually at week 9. So between week 5 and week 9, I send another email, usually at week 7 and week 8, telling my parents, okay, a midterm report comes in a week and a half. And usually I tell them either that all evaluations have been done. This is what we're learning. I tell them which units we've done, and I keep them in the loop. If we've done some evaluations and projects, I tell parents to ask their child for input. At that time, I've given a printout of all the marks I've gathered for my students to my students, and giving them the responsibility to share with their parents, because both students and parents have received this information. So that's quite exciting. So by the time we get to midterm, then what happens is that nobody's surprised with marks that are there. Having the possibility to send an email at week 8 gives me a chance to say, oh, this person has not handed in one of the evaluation. If the person can give that to me before that date, I can include it in the midterm. And I sometimes include the 2 marks. The marks if the project is in, and a mark if the project is not done, and I give zeros. And usually by midterm, there's a big difference there. So usually by the time I get to midterm, everything that I need to receive is in. Now, I've been doing that maybe for the last 3 years. So this time it's about my 7th semester I do that, and it works nicely. So very good. So week 9, perfect. So I sent one last week, which was week 10, saying that report cards were given. This is the unit we've been going. If I take a picture of a few activities we do in class, I share them with the students. I know the students are in grade 10. No, they're grade 9. They're a bit old. People say, well, people do that in elementary school. Maybe. However, if parents receive an email with what we're doing, they feel that they are part of the community. And we had a parent-teacher night on week 7, I think, this semester. And all parents were saying, oh, they were all happy that I was communicating with them because they had an idea of what we were doing, and they could ask questions to their child about what we were doing. So because sometimes the parents don't know what's happening and students don't know what to talk about with their parents, it works nicely. So we are right now on week 13. There you go. So we have on week 15 a new progress report to send home. For this report, usually we have everybody that is under 60%. We are sending emails to parents saying the reasons, projects not handed in, and things students can do to improve their marks. And So it's week 13 right now. Perfect. So most likely next week on week 14, so I'm receiving some projects, so I will mark them. So early week 15, I will send the progress report. Now, progress reports are due only for students under 60%, but I send progress report to all of my students and all of my parents. And the reason for that is that they know what's happening. So I will give a printout of all the mark I've received. I will put the mark that the computer is telling them so far. I know it's not what I will give as a mark for the report card, but this is analytical mark. It works great. So students will have data, parents will have data. It will give me a chance to say, okay, this project was not handed in, that project was not handed in. And the beauty for that is that, but it brings accountability to everybody. And by the time we finish our semester, it gives a chance for everybody to show me what best they can do. And I do believe that it's amazing. On this, these are my stories about authentic communication that is a must as a learner to learn better, as a teacher to teach better, and as a parent to be better for our students, and also for leadership at all level, regardless if you're 7 or 97. On this, have a wonderful day. I'll see you next week at 7:30. And if you have any comments, clarification, questions, put them in the comments below. I always look at them. Take care. Bye-bye.